I'm obviously, my intention with this particular resolution was really to continue the dialogue on an issue I think is very important to the city of Bakersfield, the Central Valley, to California, and to our country. I'm certainly very interested in seeing how my colleagues feel about this. I haven't had in-depth conversations with them, so I'll defer to them, and obviously quote someone who spoke earlier, hopefully appeal to their better angels in getting their support on this particular resolution and sending it off to not only Congressman McCarthy, but really any representative of Congress. The reality of this particular resolution and the reality of immigration reform is that it's not a Republican issue, it's not a Democratic issue, it's not a decline to state or independent issue, it's really an American issue. I think that's why when you look at folks who've publicly come out in support of immigration reform, the list is very long. You see folks like Western Growers on it. You see the Chamber of Commerce on it. You see the California Farm Bureau on it. You see farmers up and down the Central Valley on that list. You see our very own Republican representatives in Congress, including David Valadao, on that list. And you certainly see a whole host of other folks on that list. I wasn't born in Bakersfield. I wasn't born in California. I was born in Puerto Rico. Now, for those of you who don't know, Puerto Rico is actually a part of the U.S. It may not be attached to a big landmass, but for all intents and purposes, I was born an American citizen. It was very easy for me to come to Bakersfield. It was very easy for me to come to California. I flew on a plane. I got off the plane. My mom bought a house, and here I am. But I tell you what, the difference for me is there are two. One, I think if I still lived in Puerto Rico, I wouldn't be sitting on the city council there speaking to anyone about much of anything. In fact, no one really cared what I had to say. Bakersfield has been extremely good to me. The United States has been extremely good to me. I'm extremely blessed to be an American citizen. I don't think folks who had absolutely no control over that should really bear the brunt of a broken system. I was fortunate enough to be born an American citizen. Not everyone else in this world is. There are billions of people in this world who I think would spend decades waiting and going through the most laborious process possible in order to be that citizen, and they're not going to get it. So I'm extremely blessed. I recognize that. I realize it, and I think I try and live my life out in recognition of that fact every single day. Immigration reform for me, the issue of immigration, seems really simple to me. The frustrating and the frustrating part about this whole debate is that for decades we've been unable to solve it. And what fascinates me is that you look in history, you look at folks coming into this country, you look at how easy it's been in the past, you look at things like Ellis Island, where I think millions of Americans likely owe their heritage to. It was remarkably easy. You signed your name in a book and you became an American citizen. That is not the process now. And because of that, I think, again, there's a huge, tremendous need to reform our immigration process. I asked for a resolution in support of this particular bill, H.R. 15, for many reasons. One, I felt it struck the most appropriate balance between what many folks ask for in enhanced border security, and I think it also addressed for once and for all the issue of a pathway to citizenship for the folks that, as many folks have said this evening, are living in the shadows. I think it strikes that balance as best as possible. I think it puts to rest this issue so that ideally members of Congress and even members of the City Council can move on to more important and bigger issues, because there are many, many other issues we could be talking about. There are many, many other issues Congress could be talking about as well. This particular issue, I think, is really different, though, from a lot of the other issues we talk about, even at the City Council, because there's that all-important human element to it. We're really talking about the lives of human beings. We're talking about the futures of human beings. We're talking about their potential success or failures as human beings. We're in a unique position to enable people. We're in a unique position to get folks to succeed. I've heard horror stories over the last few months of people who've been separated for whatever reason because of our broken immigration system. You cannot tell me there isn't a human element to this issue. You can't tell me that human element doesn't drive us and require us to act on this issue. And I think it's been said a few times now. Really, the point of this entire, the reason we're even here and the reason I'm even talking about this isn't because there's a vote coming tomorrow on this issue. The unfortunate part is that we've let politics get in the way of progress. We've let politics get in the way of performing the duties we're supposed to do as elected leaders. When we have big issues, we're supposed to make statements. When we have big issues, we're supposed to act on them. Congress isn't doing that. It's not an issue of they support H.R. 15 or not. It's an issue of they won't even vote on it. And that's shameful in my mind. I can't think of a better message to send to a critical leader, I think, on this particular issue than to let him know that the city of Bakersfield lends their voice and support on this particular issue. This is by no means perfect. Nothing really ever actually is in my mind. But you know, when you work in government and when you deal with issues of this magnitude, there's such a thing as not letting imperfection get in the way of progress. We need to make progress on immigration reform. I'd really love to have the Bakersfield City Council lend our voice to that. I'd really like for us to join that effort. I think it will make a difference. And with that, I would urge my colleagues to support this. But I will allow everyone to speak first, and then we can go from there. Thank you so much.
This is not an issue for this council. And it's not an issue where we should act upon it. And having said that, I make a motion to table this resolution in this topic indefinitely until such time as 4 council members vote affirmatively to bring this matter back to the council. Thank you.
Now, I think that one of the things that everybody needs to keep in mind is that back in the 80s, we did have a comprehensive reform of the immigration in an amnesty bill that went through. It took 3 million people and took them out of the shadows and brought them forward, gave them opportunities that they didn't have before. Now, the agreement was that those people would come out of the shadows and that the borders would be not as porous as what they were before. And so I understand from one aspect that those people were fooled back then, that there was nothing done to the borders at all. And I think that's one of the fears that everybody has, is that if we do this program, if we move forward on it, that there'll be absolutely nothing really done to those borders. And when I look at H.R. 15, one of my biggest problems with it is the securing of the borders is supposed to be over the next 5 years. I'd make it in the next 6 months. I'd do it very quickly. Because if you're going to look 5 years in the future, believe me, things will have changed by then, just as things have changed since 1980s. So that's where I have my first difficulty with H.R. 15. Now, I would make it so that the borders are closed within 6 months. I would make it that everyone here that is here illegally has 6 months to claim that they're here illegally. They would be given a status of a citizen in limbo. They would be required to, within 2 years, to attain citizenship. Now, once they have attained citizenship, if you are 14 years or older when you declare that you are an illegal status, you would give up your right to vote. In this city, in this country, there would never be an opportunity for those people to vote. I think that's the penalty they pay for having broken the law, because I know that when you think about it, if we give just amnesty, or if we get a program where people are able to become full citizens, that there's really no penalty there. So I think that's a pretty fair penalty to pay. Now, I'm fortunate because I have spoken to actually 3 people that were here illegally. They were brought in by their parents. And they all agreed that, you know, if we offered that to their parents would jump on it in a second so that they could be citizens, but they understand that they would have to give up that right to vote. Now, if they did want to vote, they could take one of 2 paths. They could either work for the military, or they could go back to the country of origin and go through the process by which we already have laws, if voting is that important. Now, for anybody who's 14 or under, who was brought here not by their own choice, those people, as they went through our educational system, when they became of age, they, of course, would be full citizens and have the right to vote. Now, there would also be anybody with illegal activity would be asked to leave. I think H.R. 15 is a start. As my colleague, Councilmember Rivera, said, it's not a perfect bill. You know, unfortunately, in our society today, we've lost 2 things: compassion and compromise. You know, I understand what the problem for people who don't want these 11 million people to become full citizens is. One of the problems for conservative people is that their fear is that this whole block of voters changes the whole landscape of the United States of America. I think that's a real concern. And I think for the people that are here, you have to understand that. That's where we're asking for your compassion, because I know you're asking for our compassion. That's where it's important. You have to understand that we have been fooled once back in the 80s. I think from the people I have talked to, they have said that their parents who brought them here illegally would not have a problem with not being able to vote as long as their kids could stay here and become full citizens, that it was, to them, it was not a problem. For the people on the other side, I understand that the United States of America offers you an opportunity that you just don't get anyplace else in the world. And so I think the compromise is somewhere in what I've said and somewhere in the brains of people a lot smarter than me. And what I think is a travesty is the fact that we, as Councilmember Rivera said, we've got a legislature in Washington that has been inept in tackling this issue, coming together, and compromising. Everybody has something they want out of this. We should compromise so that the bigger issues rule the day. So rather than just completely table this, as my colleague pointed out, this is an issue that's here for today. Congress doesn't look like they're going to make any sort of a move forward on it. And I would ask that maybe the Vice Mayor would consider putting an ad hoc committee together, which I would be a member of, and I would hope that Councilmember Rivera would be a member of, so that when the city of Bakersfield does make some recommendations, which we've done in the past, we have had other times when we have certainly weighed in on a national issue, that we can weigh in and offer some real solutions, some real compromises to what is happening in Washington, D.C. I think that's where we can make the biggest impact. And for everybody that's in the audience, you have that right as a citizen of the United States of America to let everybody know how you feel. And you know, I would hope that that's the biggest impact. This Bakersfield City Council, whether we pass this resolution or not, I think your voices should be a lot more important than our voices. We're politicians. We're up here, and sometimes we do things that don't necessarily reflect exactly how the citizens of Bakersfield really feel. But in this particular issue, I think every citizen of Bakersfield should take the time to let their feelings be known. And as far as the City Council is concerned, as I say, I would ask the Vice Mayor to maybe consider putting an ad hoc together. The ad hoc can get together, maybe come up with something that says we would urge the Congress to move forward on a change of our immigration policy to solve this problem and to move forward. And here are our recommendations for that compromise. Thank you.
A few things I want to clarify. I actually last week asked our city clerk and city attorney to provide me with a list of resolutions the Bakersfield City Council has adopted over the last 10 years. There are 30 of them, and this is the list here. There are resolutions in support of all different types of things. I'm looking at one here in support of real and long-lasting solutions to the state's budget crisis. That was in 2003. I don't think I need to remind everyone, but our budget was in dire need of help in 2003. We have resolutions in support of high-speed rail, which I thought was funny. And we have resolutions in support of all sorts of things. My point being, I think it's entirely appropriate to be discussing this issue at this city council, if for no other reason than we've set a precedent before, but then how about because this particular issue has a tremendous economic impact on our city. It has a tremendous economic impact on our community. And if for no other reason, we should make a statement because of that. I want to clarify a few things on H.R. 15. It is, in fact, actually the result of compromise. It's the result of Congress actually coming together, which doesn't happen often, but it's the result of Republicans and Democrats coming to the table, coming to the same room even, and actually talking about immigration reform. This is what they came up with. The United States Senate passed it. They passed it with a 2/3 majority. They've passed it. Congress won't even vote on it. But it's neither here nor there. I just simply want to make it clear that it is the result of compromise and bipartisan efforts. One other note, I don't want to get too much in the weeds on H.R. 15 in general, because if you read any bill in Congress, you'll find they're overly complicated and overly long and far too complicated. Really, immigration reform it's really an easy fix. But one thing that really struck me and stood out was this issue of border security. Everything we're talking about, either with a pathway to citizenship or anything else, is null and void, means absolutely nothing if we don't accomplish the goal of securing the border. That's actually an interest of mine. I think that's critical. I think we need to do it. I think if you polled the city council, they'd tell you the same thing. So again, I think it's important to note there's a trigger that meaning you don't get a pathway to citizenship or anything else unless you properly secure the border. This is part of the problem for me when it comes to immigration reform or any other issue. We use broad strokes to describe things we need to do. Securing the border doesn't secure the border. It doesn't actually mean anything to me. I don't know what securing the border does. You have to outline what you're going to do in order to accomplish that. This bill does that. 5 years may be too long of a time, but if we haven't managed to figure it out over the last 20 years, my guess might be we need more than 6 months, honestly. I mean, I'll tell you. But I'll, again, leave that to folks who are in the position to make those determinations. My only interest in this was really to get the community of Bakersfield to lend our support, lend our voice, lend our hand and our aid to an issue I think is very important. And, regardless of whatever happens this evening, the world moves on. Immigration reform is going to continue to be a hot-button issue. I think if you polled each council member on the council after this meeting, they'd likely tell you we need to reform our immigration system in one way or another, and if that's closing the border, then that's part of, that's immigration reform. Closing the border keeps immigrants out. So, with all due respect to my colleagues, I do think this is an issue we should make our voice known on. I've obviously made my voice known. Everyone knows now, but I'll defer to everyone else and let the the rest of the meeting proceed so that we can continue doing the business of the city and move on.
First of all, our vote carries no rule of law, so I think it really is immaterial. And so consequently, I support Councilmember Weir, Vice Mayor Weir's motion, and I call a question.
Mayor, Councilmember, with the call for the question, I need you to please have a motion on a call for the question. That means there is no more debate, no more comment from any of the council members. It requires a 2/3 vote. If there's 5 of you that vote in favor to limit the debate, then we'll move on to the Vice Mayor's motion.
So then I need to call for a vote
On the calling for the question.
on calling for the question.
Correct. And everyone needs to understand that if that vote passes with 5 affirmative votes, there is no more discussion from any council member.
Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved with Councilmember Rivera voting no.
We then move to Vice Mayor Weir's motion, which, as I understand it, is a motion to table the resolution and the topic indefinitely until an affirmative vote of 4 council members. That is your motion.
You have a motion. Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved with Councilmembers Rivera and Maxwell voting no.